"Sir, I'm calling the police. This prescription is clearly forged." Those words rang out across the CVS pharmacy as 24-year-old Ashley Morrison waved a prescription slip like evidence at a crime scene, her voice loud enough for everyone in line to hear. The elderly man standing before her said nothing, just slowly reached for his wallet with trembling hands. What fell out onto that counter would expose Ashley's cruel judgment and reveal that she'd just accused one of America's most decorated Navy SEALs of being a drug-seeking criminal. The pharmacy manager's reaction would be swift and absolute. If you believe people deserve the benefit of doubt before being accused, type respect right now. Daniel Trident Kowalski stood at the CVS pharmacy counter on a cold November afternoon, his 82-year-old body held upright through sheer force of will and decades of ingrained discipline. The pain that brought him here was constant now, a grinding ache in his back and legs from injuries sustained during operations that most people didn't know had happened. His face was deeply lined, weathered by sun and salt water, and years of stress that aged men faster than time alone could manage. He wore a plain navy windbreaker over a white polo shirt, khaki pants that had seen better days, and scuffed sneakers. His thinning white hair was cut military short, and his posture, despite the pain, retained that unmistakable bearing of someone who'd served. Daniel lived alone in a modest apartment 3 miles from this pharmacy, his wife of 40 years having passed 5 years ago, his children scattered across the country with families and careers of their own. The VA hospital was farther away, and his doctor had called in this prescription to make things easier for him, or so he'd thought. Ashley Morrison had been working at this CVS for 2 years, long enough to develop strong opinions about customers and their prescriptions. She considered herself vigilant, someone who could spot drug seekers and prescription fraud. In her mind, she was protecting the pharmacy, preventing abuse of the system, but her vigilance had curdled into suspicion, and her suspicion into judgment. She saw patterns where none existed, assumed guilt based on appearance and age. Elderly people requesting pain medication were automatic red flags in her assessment. She'd lectured her co-workers about the opioid crisis, about how they needed to be gatekeepers, about how doctors were too quick to prescribe and patients were too quick to abuse. Never mind that she had no medical training beyond her technician certification. Never mind that it wasn't her job to question legitimate prescriptions. In her mind, she was doing the right thing. When Daniel handed over his prescription for pain medication, a moderate dose prescribed by his VA doctor for service-connected injuries, Ashley's eyes narrowed immediately. She held the prescription slip up to the light, examining it with theatrical suspicion. "This doesn't look right," she announced loudly. Several customers in line behind Daniel glanced up. An older woman frowned. A young mother with a toddler looked uncomfortable. Ashley continued her inspection, making a show of checking the doctor's signature, the DEA number, the patient information. Daniel waited patiently. He'd learned patience in ways Ashley couldn't imagine, waiting motionless in swamps for enemy patrols, waiting in underwater darkness for extraction, waiting through interrogations designed to break lesser men. He could wait through this, too. "Sir, when was this prescription written?" Ashley's tone was accusatory. Daniel's voice was quiet, steady. 3 days ago. My doctor called it in to your pharmacy. He said it would be ready today." Ashley shook her head, her ponytail swinging with the emphasis of her disapproval. "Well, it's not in our system. And frankly, this looks suspicious. The handwriting seems off. The dosage is high. How do I know you didn't write this yourself?" The words hung in the air like an accusation in a courtroom. Daniel's jaw tightened slightly, but his voice remained calm. "Miss, my doctor called it in. Dr. Richardson at the VA. You can verify it with him." Ashley crossed her arms. "The VA, huh? Convenient. I've seen this before. Old guys claiming service-connected pain, doctor shopping, trying to get pills they can sell or abuse. I'm not filling this until I verify, and honestly, I don't think I'm going to fill it at all." She picked up the phone. I'm calling the police. Let them sort this out. Murmurs rippled through the customers in line. Daniel stood very still, that particular stillness that came from training and experience. His hands, which had trembled slightly when he'd handed over the prescription, were now steady. Ashley noticed and took it as confirmation of her suspicions. See? Suddenly the shaking stops. Classic drug-seeking behavior. You're fine until you don't get what you want. She began dialing. Daniel's voice cut through, quiet, but carrying an edge of something that made Ashley pause. Miss, before you do that, let me show you something. Daniel reached for his wallet, the movement slow and deliberate. His fingers, gnarled with arthritis and old injuries, worked the worn leather open. He pulled out cards and papers, his hands shaking again now not from deception but from the genuine tremor that came with age and damage. As he tried to extract what he needed, his grip failed. The wallet tumbled from his hands, hitting the counter and spilling its contents across the pharmacy counter and onto the floor. A cascade of cards and paper scattered everywhere. Ashley rolled her eyes. Great, more drama. But then she looked down at what had fallen, and she froze. A military ID card, aged and laminated, with United States Navy, SEAL Team 2, clearly visible. A black credit card emblazoned with Medal of Honor Foundation, recipient. A folded newspaper clipping, yellowed, with age, with a headline visible, Navy SEAL saves 23 during Grenada rescue, the Hero of Grenada. And a small, worn photograph of a much younger Daniel in dress uniform, the distinctive Navy Cross ribbon prominent among multiple rows of medals. Ashley's face went white. Her hand holding the phone went slack. Behind Daniel, customers had moved closer, trying to see what had caused the reaction. An older man in a Marine Corps cap bent down to help pick up the items, and as he did, he saw the SEAL ID and the Medal of Honor card. His eyes widened. Sir, he breathed, you're Daniel Kowalski. The Daniel Kowalski? Daniel nodded slightly, embarrassed by the attention, as he always was. The Marine stood straight and saluted, even though neither man was in uniform, his eyes suddenly bright with emotion. Sir, it's an honor, an absolute honor. Ashley stood paralyzed behind the counter, the phone still in her hand, her earlier confidence evaporating. Other customers were picking up the dropped items, handling them with the reverence you'd show holy relics. The newspaper clipping passed through several hands. People reading about the nighttime rescue operation in Grenada, where Daniel had single-handedly extracted 23 American medical students from a hostile compound, fighting through enemy fire and carrying wounded students to safety while his own team provided cover. From the pharmacy office, the manager had heard the commotion. Jennifer Martinez emerged, a woman in her late 40s with close-cropped gray hair and the bearing of someone who'd served. She had Army, 2 tours in Iraq as a combat medic, now managing this CVS while finishing her degree in healthcare administration. She saw the scattered items on the counter, saw Ashley frozen with the phone, saw the customers clustering around the elderly man at the counter. Then she saw the SEAL Team 2 ID and the Medal of Honor Foundation card. Jennifer's breath caught. She walked quickly to the counter, taking in the scene. What's going on here? Her tone was sharp, directed at Ashley. Ashley seemed to snap out of her paralysis. The prescription seemed suspicious, and I was going to verify. Jennifer cut her off. You were threatening to call the police on this man? For what? She'd picked up Daniel's ID now, reading it carefully. Her eyes moved to Daniel's face, then back to the ID. Recognition dawned. Daniel Kowalski, SEAL Team 2, Grenada, Panama, Gulf War, multiple combat deployments. She looked at Ashley. You were calling the police on a Medal of Honor recipient? Ashley's voice was small now. I didn't know. The prescription seemed... Jennifer's voice dropped to something cold and dangerous. He looked like what, Ashley? Old? Poor? Not important enough to deserve respect? Not trustworthy because he's requesting pain medication for injuries he received serving this country. She turned to her computer, fingers flying across the keyboard. After a moment, she looked up, her expression furious. His prescription is right here in our system, called in 3 days ago by Dr. Richardson at the VA, exactly as Mr. Kowalski said. It's been ready for pickup since yesterday. You didn't even bother to check properly before you accused him of fraud. Ashley's face crumbled. I thought I was protecting... Jennifer held up a hand. Stop. You weren't protecting anything. You were making assumptions based on prejudice. You humiliated a customer, a war hero, in front of everyone in this pharmacy. You threatened him with police action for the crime of being old and requesting medication he legitimately needs and deserves. Jennifer moved around the counter to stand beside Daniel. Mr. Kowalski, on behalf of this pharmacy and this company, I apologize deeply. Your service, your sacrifice, the pain you carry from that service, you deserved nothing but respect and efficient care. Instead, you were treated like a criminal. Daniel's voice was quiet. Ma'am, it's all right. She didn't know. But Jennifer shook her head firmly. No, sir, it's not all right. She should have checked the system before making accusations. She should have treated you with basic human dignity, regardless of who you are or what you've done. That's the minimum standard of customer service, let alone how we should treat veterans. She turned back to Ashley. You're fired. Effective immediately. Clean out your locker and leave. Ashley's mouth opened in shock. What? But I was just trying to... Jennifer's expression was unyielding. You were making judgments you had no right to make. You publicly accused a customer of criminal activity without even checking if the prescription was in our system. You were about to involve police in what was either your laziness or your prejudice. This is cause for immediate termination. Leave now. The Marine Corps veteran who'd first recognized Daniel had been joined by others. A younger man approached, identifying himself as Army Infantry, Iraq veteran. Sir, I've heard about Grenada. What you did that night, extracting those students under fire. That's taught in some of our training courses as an example of operational courage. An older woman, who'd been in line complaining about the wait, approached Daniel with tears in her eyes. My nephew is a Navy SEAL. He talks about men like you with such reverence. Thank you doesn't seem adequate, but thank you. Daniel accepted their words with quiet grace, clearly uncomfortable with the attention, but understanding it mattered to them. Jennifer personally filled his prescription, adding a note to his file that he was to receive priority service and that any staff member who treated him with anything less than utmost respect would face immediate consequences. She bagged his medication and handed it to him. Mr. Kowalski, your prescriptions are free here from now on. I'll work with corporate to set up a program for Medal of Honor recipients. It's the least we can do. As Ashley gathered her things from the back room, tears streaming down her face, the full weight of what she'd done settled on her. She'd been so certain, so confident in her judgment, so sure she was right. She'd thought the old man was just another drug seeker, someone trying to game the system. She'd never considered that he might be someone who'd earned the right to pain medication through sacrifices she couldn't comprehend, that his trembling hands might be the result of operations that saved American lives, that the elderly man she'd mocked might be a recipient of the nation's highest honor for valor. Her phone buzzed with texts from co-workers who'd already heard what happened. Social media was exploding with posts from customers who'd filmed part of the incident. She was being called out, criticized, her judgment questioned publicly. Everything she'd thought she was, vigilant, protective, smart, was revealed as nothing more than prejudice dressed up as prudence. As she walked out of the CVS carrying her box of personal items, she passed customers who were now lined up to speak with Daniel, to thank him, to shake his hand. She'd lost her job, but worse, she'd lost her credibility and her self-respect. Daniel finally left the pharmacy an hour later, his medication in hand, but also something else. A renewed sense that maybe he still mattered, that his service hadn't been forgotten by everyone. Jennifer had given him her personal number and told him to call if he ever had any issues with prescriptions or anything else. The Marine Corps veteran had exchanged contact information, inviting him to a local veterans gathering. Several customers had asked to take photos with him, which he'd reluctantly agreed to. It wasn't the recognition he wanted. Daniel had never been comfortable with attention, but he understood that sometimes these moments of connection mattered to others, helped them feel linked to something larger than themselves. As he walked to his car, the pain in his back and legs was the same as when he'd entered, but something else had shifted. He felt less invisible, less like a burden, more like the person he'd once been. Not the hero the newspapers had written about, but simply a man who'd done his job and survived to tell about it. The incident at CVS went viral within days. Videos of the confrontation, Jennifer's firing of Ashley, and customers lining up to honor Daniel spread across social media platforms. News outlets picked up the story. The local paper ran a feature on Daniel, detailing his service in Grenada, where he and his SEAL team had conducted a daring nighttime rescue of American medical students during the 1983 invasion. They detailed how Daniel had fought through enemy positions, sustained multiple injuries, and personally carried 3 wounded students to the extraction point while under continuous fire. The operation had saved 23 lives and earned Daniel the Medal of Honor. The article also addressed the broader issue of how veterans, especially elderly ones, were often treated when seeking medical care or prescriptions. How suspicion and judgment replaced respect and gratitude. CVS corporate office issued a statement apologizing to Daniel and announcing a new training program for all pharmacy staff on serving veterans with dignity. Jennifer was promoted to regional manager, tasked with implementing veteran-focused policies across multiple locations. Ashley Morrison became the face of what not to do, a cautionary tale spread across social media and used in corporate training videos about unconscious bias and the importance of verification before accusation. She struggled to find pharmacy work after the incident, her name attached to the controversy. Eventually, she began volunteering at a VA hospital, trying to understand what she'd failed to understand before. That veterans carried invisible wounds alongside visible ones, that service left scars not always apparent to the eye. That judgment without knowledge was cruelty, dressed as caution. It would take years for her to rebuild her reputation, and she'd carry the shame of that November afternoon for the rest of her life. The lesson came too late to save her job, but perhaps not too late to save who she could become. Meanwhile, Daniel continued his quiet life, now with a community of supporters who checked on him, invited him to events, and made sure he never felt invisible again. The newspaper clipping went back in his wallet, along with his SEAL ID and the Medal of Honor Foundation card. Reminders not of his heroism, but of his humanity, and the humanity he deserved to receive in return. Subscribe to my channel if you believe veterans deserve respect and proper care, regardless of their age or appearance. Share this story if you think young people need to understand that the elderly person in front of them might have done extraordinary things in service of others. Before you judge someone requesting pain medication, remember they might be managing injuries from operations that saved American lives. Before you assume someone is gaming the system, verify your facts and check your prejudices. Type honor if this story moved you, and remember Daniel Trident Kowalski, who rescued 23 people under fire and asked for nothing more than to fill his prescription in peace. True heroes don't demand special treatment, they just want basic human dignity. Give them that. They've earned it 1,000 times over. The Medal of Honor isn't just a piece of metal. It's a reminder that some people gave everything when their country called. The least we can do is treat them with respect when they need us.